Good afternoon. Peace. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Dilara Saeed, and on behalf of Rima Kamran, my co-president, we welcome you to the historic release of Illinois Muslims, Needs, Assets, and Opportunities. We begin in the name of our Creator, most praiseworthy, most giving. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And then I just want to continue with the words of my daughter, who this morning said, "Mama, this is cool." In all transparency, we had technical difficulties, and some of what you're watching was re-recorded, but it allows for clearer viewing. There are 120 of us at capacity at the Cardinal Room at the University of Illinois at Chicago, people doing great work in every sector. And we also had over 550 registered for Zoom. We will be sending out the recorded presentations, and some of us were all here to learn about a diverse and complex community that we live, work, and play with. Some of us were here just to learn about ourselves and our communities. Stories are critical, and each of us has an American Muslim story, an American story, who we are, what we do, what challenges we face, and what gives us hope. The first to call himself American in my family came almost 70 years ago. My father-in-law, Muhammad Mahmoud Saeed. He was so novel in his small town of Normal, Illinois. They did a story on him in the local newspaper. In fact, they put his address in the article, and I don't think they would have done that today. He needed to be resilient and courageous through many trials, challenges, and throughout his career, yes, discrimination that he faced. His story joins those African-American communities who came north to escape the Jim Crow laws, and others, immigrants, who came to this land to build a life. Our stories are important, but we must be able to support our stories with actionable data. This together helps our leaders, policymakers, public officials, philanthropists, businesses know us, serve us, and utilize our talents. Dad passed away several years ago, but as we were going through the books in his beloved study, we found a 4-page folded pamphlet titled Muslims of Illinois. It was a 1997 report written by Dr. Ilyas Ba Yunus of New York. It was the first of its kind. America is diverse, and in this complex land, we now know Illinois has the largest per capita Muslim population in the nation, every race, class, and background. A snapshot of Illinois Muslims is a snapshot of America's Muslims. And that's why this report is very timely and very important. It has implications for residents of every community across the nation. For 3 years, the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition was honored to collaborate with the University of Illinois at Chicago and the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. Everyone here worked on this report in some way, identifying important topics, forwarding survey results and requests, joining focus groups, and making sure that you're supporting us in any way you can. I'd like to first share our appreciation of the research team led by UIC's Dr. Joe Horth and ISPU's Dalia Mugahed, and each of their team members. I'd also like to recognize the board, Next Gen board, and the team at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition. Rima and I are honored and humbled to be able to convene thousands of residents for this initiative with you. We have faith leaders from every community working with us as allies and joining us. Our faiths bind us. We serve our Creator by serving His creation. And we have dozens of public officials represented. We will work with them to better serve our communities together. We could not have done this report without our sponsors, IFANCA, Islamic Food and Nutrition Council of America, was our lead sponsor, and they are joined by major philanthropy, corporate, and foundations. You can still sponsor the report, and details are shared here. Please email us at info@ilmuslimciviccoalition.org. Our hope is that each of us will help disseminate this report through community events and roundtables. We want this to be a tool for change to ensure every resident is seen, heard, and served so that they can build a life. And now let's get to the findings of this empowering report.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Petra Al-Sufi, and I'm the Outreach and Partnerships Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. I am joined here by my colleague, Dr. Joseph Horth, who is the co-principal investigator, the report co-author, and the director of the Institute for Policy and Civic Engagement at the University of Illinois, Chicago. I want to thank the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition for convening this report or this project 3 years ago and for bringing us today to share the report finding. And before we get started on the report finding and the data, I want to acknowledge that this project or this report is the product of 3 years of tireless effort by the Illinois leaders to define, fund, and execute this historical study. The result of this research can help guide leaders, officials, volunteers, policymakers, corporations, media members, social, civic, and philanthropic organizations, as well as American Muslim leaders in the Illinois community, as well as the whole nation. The report presents an empirical assessment of the strength and struggles of the Illinois Muslim community, and it was convened by the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and the research was conducted by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, my organization. And it was our co-researchers are the Institute for Policy and Civic Engagement, and my colleague Joe will introduce it.
Thank you, Petra. I'm Joe Horth, Director of the Institute for Policy and Civic Engagement, and here at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Our role on this project, next slide, was to field the survey, compile the results, analyze the results, and prepare the final report. This survey included 2 components, an in-depth 74-question online survey and 4 focus groups. It was fielded to Illinois Muslims between October 2021 and January 2022, using what's commonly referred to as snowball methodology. With the help of IMCC and its rich and dense network of partners, this resulted in 1,760 survey responses from Illinois Muslims across the state. In addition, and for the basis of comparison, research partner ISPU fielded the same survey from a panel of the Illinois general public online using the same online platform. And this gave us the basis for comparison. So, for example, you'll hear us say in this presentation, our results versus the Illinois general public. Also want to note, we did the focus groups that gave us an opportunity to have more in-depth discussion, and also that the survey was available in 8 different languages. With every research, there's always limitations or important caveats to note. So let's just note those really quickly about this particular research. Again, this data was collected during the pandemic, and that made some of the outreach challenging, especially among networks that rely on in-person or word-of-mouth communication. Also, we compared non-probability samples, something you might not want to do, for example, in clinical research where high levels of precision is required, but is often done for social science research like this, and we have language in the report that explains that. I want to take a brief note and say on the slide, we use the term Black Muslims, and also in the report, just for a point of clarity, that refers to anyone of African American identity who is Muslim, not just someone who identifies as a group referred to as Black Muslims. We know our sample underrepresented Black African American respondents, overrepresented wealthier respondents, and this is not uncommon as we see those trends in surveys overall. And we did take some steps to mitigate these imbalances. We used our focus groups to focus on underrepresented populations within the sample. We used weighting and other steps to address them. So before we jump into the presentation of the full results, just want to talk a little bit about how we structured the presentation, which is pretty much how it's structured in the report. We're going to break down the data into different segments, the demographics of the whole community, questions about the individuals themselves, questions about their family, household unit, and the community, and how they interact with the broader society. And of course, we'll close out with a whole host of recommendations. Within each of these sections, we'll talk about the data as assets and needs. And of course, there's more than one way to look at any piece of data. But when we talk about needs, we're really talking about opportunities. And so we want to just highlight that connection there, because that's where a lot of our recommendations originate. So I'll turn it over to Petra. Petra, tell us more about who responded to the survey.
So, who are the Illinois Muslims? There is, as mentioned, there's far too much in this report, so we will do a quick run through of this. The Illinois Muslim sample is the youngest, the most diverse faith community in the state, and it's also the most representing or looking like the most diverse faith community in the nation. That's very similar to how the American Muslim community look like nationally. It is also, the Illinois Muslim samples is our rich source of capable labor, innovative ideas, and professional expertise. You'll see here they represent the high level of education, college education, and above that. And I want to note that 92% of our sample are eligible to vote. And research after research on the American Muslim community and the Illinois Muslim sample show that the strong Muslim identity is connected to a strong American identity. There is no difference between the two. And immigration and arrival in the U.S. as refugees is part of the American story, part of the American Muslim story, and part of the Illinois Muslim story. Another interesting finding is that roughly 10% of the Illinois Muslim sample reported that they have a disability. It's interesting to note that this is lower than the general public in Illinois, as well as lower than the national American Muslim sample, where a third of American Muslims say they know someone who have a disability. An opportunity here for engagement is on political affiliation. American Muslim political affiliation have changed over the last couple of decades for so many reasons. And right now, what we saw with the Illinois Muslim sample is that 58% identify as Democrats, 4% identify as Republicans, and 38% identify as independent. The Democrat is on par with the Illinois general public. The independent and Republican is different from the general public in Illinois. But all of this represent opportunities for engagement and addressing the needs and challenges faced by American Muslims and Illinois Muslims specifically. I want to note that the findings that we're presenting here today are Illinois Muslims are represented in the top 10 counties where Illinois Muslims are present are shown here in this graph, but we want to note that at least 22 counties are identified in our report. And now, as Joe mentioned earlier, we will dig deeper into the individual assets and needs, family, community, and broader society. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe to give us a glimpse of what the individual looks like.
Thanks, Petra. I'll just jump right in. An asset right off the bat about the respondents was a very strong faith identity. That rang through loud and clear, as 84% of respondents stated that their faith was very important to their self-perception, compared with 39% of the general public respondents. And also related to that strong faith identity was the concept of halal. And in the report, the report recognizes halal as a broad concept. We have here an example of a question related to food and access to food. And so we see that Illinois Muslim sample was more likely to lack access to food that meets religious dietary restrictions. Here we see almost 40% of parents of school-age children and 32% of college students indicated they did not have access to food that met their dietary restrictions at their schools. Another need was affordable, culturally appropriate mental health services, where folks who had expressed that they had needed mental health services but not sought them out identified cost, that it was too expensive, 35%, far more, 1/3, than any other reason for not accessing that service. To highlight some questions about family and the family unit of the respondents, one clear asset was strong intergenerational support. And so compared to the Illinois general population sample, next slide, we see that a greater percentage of the Illinois Muslim sample care for their elderly relatives. And this suggests that those elderly relatives are more likely to have family engagement and companionship, which research has shown is actually produces better health outcomes for the elderly. However, on the flip side of that, for the caretakers of those elderly, among them, they are reporting that they're doing a lot of these tasks that are time-intensive, labor-intensive, assisting with housework, transportation, health-related tasks, or being the main social outlet for their elderly parent or family member. And we can see that this is time-consuming and presents a burden for those particular individuals. And this suggests possibly the need for more elder care support, which would not just be of assistance to the elderly themselves, but to the household unit as a whole. Highlight a couple of other needs here. Folks responded that more support, they wanted to see more support from divorced families from within their faith community. Another need was improved access and awareness of job placement opportunities and social services. 1/3 of the sample was worried about being able to pay their bills. While that's less than the general public, it's still 1/3. So that's a very important need that speaks to this issue. Also, next slide, the fact that the sample accessed social welfare programs at a lower rate than the general public might indicate some barriers there that need to be addressed, also related to this same theme of improved access and awareness of social services. Now, when we move on to see some highlights about community, I'm going to turn it over to Petra. And Petra, tell us more about that.
Thank you, Joe. So we looked at the individual and the family, and now let's look at the community. And here it's important to note when we talk about the community, we're referring to the Muslim community in Illinois. So as we're going to go through this, present assets and needs. One of the assets presented by the Illinois Muslim sample is they give generously. They're very generous. And there are a lot of reasons to explain that. 83% of the Illinois Muslim sample said that they donate or they contribute to a charity, to an organization, or to a cause within their faith community. It's important to know that zakah is part of our faith. So that's one reason to explain it. Zakah is also seen as philanthropy. Other research on the larger American Muslim community shows that American Muslims believe that those with more should give to those with less. And that poverty is mostly due to societal circumstances of the individual and less about their lack of work ethic. So those are some of the things that might be contributing to their generous contribution. It's also important to know that when they do give, they give at a higher dollar amount to a lot of causes. And it's another asset presented by the Illinois Muslims is they believe there should be, although they report less drug use and alcohol use in the community, they believe there should be more support for those who are struggling. And that's on par with what we see with the National American Muslim community. The use of drug or the use of substance abuse within the Illinois Muslim communities around 1/3 or a third of the community report they know someone who's struggling, yet 3/4 believe there should be more support. So that's really reassuring. An area of need is, although they give generously, we need to diversify what we give to. You will see here that Illinois Muslims, like other Muslims and like other faith communities, give generously to their places of worship. They also give generously to organizations, organization relief or overseas relief organizations. Again, that's on par with some other faith communities. One thing that caught my attention was that they give at a higher level than the general public in Illinois to organizations that provide domestic relief, which is very reassuring considering some of the events or some of the news that's coming out of the nation lately. However, when we look at other causes that are important and that provide or contribute to some of the issues presented in the community, we're seeing there needs to be a little bit more diversifying of donating to those organizations that address youth and family causes, research organizations. So if you believe this is a valuable report that we're sharing with you today, there need to be more to support that kind of work. Educational organizations, and then civil and civic organizations. Although American Muslims and Illinois Muslims give a little bit higher than the general public to these organizations, we're still seeing a need there. Another need that's presented, and there are a lot of resources that are available to address that and how the community address it, is more responsive sacred spaces. Illinois Muslim sample are twice as likely as the Illinois general public to state that their opinion does not matter in their places or houses of worship. So please take note, and we have a lot of toolkits to guide with that. Another need, unfortunately, actually two needs combined together, is gender discrimination and racial discrimination, which I will go back and forth between the two. Illinois Muslim sample is experiencing discrimination both within their faith community and outside of that community. And unfortunately, women in the Illinois Muslim sample are experiencing at a higher or significantly higher level of gender discrimination from within their faith community. Same thing is going on with anti-Black racism or anti-Black racial discrimination within the Illinois Muslim sample. We are seeing here that Black Muslims are experiencing a higher level of discrimination than those white, Arab, or Asian in the Muslim sample.
Thanks, Petra. So now that we've heard about within the community, we're now moving to broader questions about the broader society and how Illinois Muslim contributions and interactions with the broader society work. So first was one asset is Illinois Muslims create jobs. More than 1 in 10 of the sample are self-employed or business owners. Those are the engines that create jobs. And so we could extrapolate from these responses to find and estimate that Illinois Muslims create more than 350,000 jobs, nearly 6% of all jobs in Illinois. However, on the flip side of that, I also want to note that 20% of the respondents indicated they were unemployed. That's not on this slide, but that's in contrast to the job creation. Another asset is diverse expertise. 1/5 of the Illinois Muslim sample works in the healthcare industry. Just think about what that meant during the pandemic, to have 1/5 of the Muslim community being so relied on during such a critical, pivotal moment in an important sector in our state. Another asset is strong civic and political engagement. About 1/3 of the Muslim sample has ever volunteered for a political organization or a candidate. And again, these are activities that go beyond voting. So that's a strong asset for civic engagement broadly in Illinois. Another need, a need related to the broader society is mosque opposition remains a challenge. More than 1/3 of Illinois Muslim sample reported resistance to mosque expansion or new building plans. And I'd like to just point out that ISPU has released a countering anti-Muslim mosque opposition toolkit that might be a helpful resource for this particular issue, but we're still seeing it as a need. Another need, of course, religious discrimination. more than half of the Illinois Muslim sample reported facing religious discrimination, 52%, which is more likely than the 24% of the general sample. And again, this is in line with ISPU national data on religious discrimination faced by the Muslim community. Here we see on the next slide a quote from a focus group participant who viewed Islamophobia as a security issue for Muslims and the paradox of needing armed security at the mosque. The next slide talks about bullying as a need. 1/3 of the sample was school-aged children reported having a child faced with bullying in some way, shape, or form. I also note that this survey took place during COVID when many children are homeschooled.
The recommendations in this report were developed by the researchers in collaboration with the coalition. And I want to note that there are 50 recommendations in this report for 8 stakeholder groups. Now, we will not go through all 50, but here's a start. For funders and philanthropists, one very key recommendation is recognize community diversity in service to all marginalized and often invisible residents. Invest equitably in Muslim-led nonprofits based on demographics and needs. Educators, we saw the data on bullying and discrimination, and I want to note that's actually lower than what we see in our national survey, which is 52% of American Muslim families report that their children are facing religious-based bullying in the school system, and 1 out of 3 cases is at the hands of an adult. So our recommendation here is include implicit bias training related to Islamophobia and religious-based bullying awareness in staff cultural sensitivity training. Direct social service providers increase outreach to Muslim communities regarding job trainings and employment support. Business community, understand halal as a healthy, ethical way of living and a great business opportunity. Muslim community leaders and members, this is really important even for me personally, invest in and support specialized faith, social, and civic organizations to address specific needs. The Muslim community is large and diverse, and one or few organizations can no longer meet every need. There is no one voice in this diverse community, so intra-community collaboration and coalition building is critical between races, ethnicities, gender, etc. And this is important for the Illinois Muslim and for the national communities. Joe, can you give us some recommendations for government and policymakers?
Sure. Just like all the other categories, we had some recommendations for them. And one is ensure Muslim experts are at the table when policy is being made, not after or not after it's already been developed. The next slide talks about some recommendations for allies, advocates, and practitioners who we suggest organize and speak up against local efforts to disenfranchise Muslim communities, such as in the form of mosque opposition, as one example that we highlighted earlier spoke to, and then access expertise in the Muslim community for advisors, boards, and commissions in every sector. As we saw, the employment of Muslims concentrated in certain sectors, but also spread out across a wide range of sectors. So there's clearly expertise in a wide range of topics there to tap on. So while we identify these recommendations, there's areas where future research is required, definitely, that was highlighted by this survey. Further research that robustly examines the perspectives of Black Muslims needs to be done. Further research that focuses on the needs of economically disadvantaged Muslims in Illinois. We identified some areas there in the survey that really need to be looked into with research and unpacked and better understood. And then greater exploration of the healthcare needs of Muslims patients, especially why they were less likely than the general public to receive care, particularly at times where they indicated they needed it, but didn't access it for whatever the reasons were, including the most common barrier that we noted, cost. So I do want to note that this is This is also just the beginning. Of course, the coalition has already scheduled roundtables and presentations over the next 6 months to further get this data out into the public discourse. And you see their info at ilmuslimciviccoalition.org, where you can send an email if you'd like to participate in those. I'll turn it over to Petra.
Thank you so much for listening to this very short presentation. Again, we will encourage you to read the report, or at least the key findings, to get more of what's there, the topics that are covered, the communities that are addressed and highlighted. And as Joe mentioned, to look at some of the further research that still need to be done.
Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace, everyone. This is a historic moment in time. The first Illinois Muslims report has officially been launched. Now we can tell our own story. Community leaders and members will have access to data that will allow them to tap into our talents and strengths and understand our needs. You can access the full report at illinoismuslims.org if you haven't already done so. 3 ways for you to get involved. Join us as a sponsor or contribute. Join us as a task force member, host a roundtable or community presentation. I now pass it to my brother Clyde to give you more information on how to do just that.
Thank you, Arshia. First, we want to thank our current sponsors. Our lead sponsor is Islamic Food and Nutrition Council of America, IFANCA. We also have legacy sponsors and institutional sponsors. We thank them for their incredible support. You can join them to become a legacy sponsor. Just send an email to info@illinoismuslimciviccoalition.org. The second way to get involved is to be part of the task force. Look at the amazing leaders and influencers who have helped us every step of the way. You can join the task force to provide your input and expertise. Just go to illinoismuslims.org. The third way to get involved is to host a roundtable or community presentation so that your community or other interest group can learn about this report. To host a roundtable, contact Tariq El-Amin, the Illinois Muslim Report Director of Community Engagement. You can email him at info@illinoismuslimciviccoalition.org. Some of our scheduled upcoming events are roundtables for business, healthcare, policymakers, and other sectors. There will also be community dinners where the report will be presented, as well as fireside chats with public officials.
Thank you so much, Brother Clyde. So once again, join this historic moment in time with us. Sponsor or contribute, join a task force, or host a roundtable and community presentation. If you haven't already done so, access the full report at illinoismuslims.org. And as we end, thank you to the 131 attendees who joined us for this historic launch at the beautiful Cardinal Room at the University of Illinois. And thank you to the 500 members who registered and joined us via Zoom. We thank all of our supporters, sponsors, and stakeholders. We hope that you will make history with us, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you once again.